Rev up your engines!
Now here's some car myths that I hear from people, so I gotta dispel them. Car myths that are just not true. The first one is premium fuel will help your car's performance. No, it won't, and in some cases it'll make it run worse. Premium fuel is only for engines that are designed that way, that have super high compression engines, and they will ping and knock when they accelerate if you use cheaper fuel. But most modern cars, even the expensive ones, they have computer setups so that they'll run on any kind of fuel perfectly fine. Now the next myth is that you should replace all your tires at the same time. That's false, unless you own an all-wheel drive vehicle. If you do own an all-wheel drive vehicle, it's always all-wheel drive, not four-wheel, but all fours run all the time. You got to change them all because it can screw up your transmission and transfer case because it's all computer controlled. If one tire is a different size than the other to wear the internal parts of your transmission and drivetrain. Any other car, it is a good idea to replace your tires in pairs. If your left front tire is bad, you should change the right front so the axles are the same. Or if one rear tire is bad, you should replace them both. But you don't have to replace all four at the same time. The next myth is that using your cell phone while you're pumping gas can make an explosion. That's not true. They don't generate sparks. Now, smoking while you're filling a car up, yeah, that's a stupid idea. You don't want to do that. But cell phones do not create sparks that make explosions imminent. They just don't. It will not start an explosion. Now, the next myth, a lot of people say electric cars are more susceptible to starting fire, that the electric cars start fire all the time, If they're properly designed and recharged correctly, they're safe. But the problem is they have lithium-ion batteries in them, most of them. And once they start fire, they're really hard to put out, and the car generally burns down to the ground. Display of flames, and when it gets in the news, everybody throws it out there. In terms of percentages, it's not actually true. Let's say you got one of the crappy made ones, like those Chevys, where they said, don't park your car in the garage and charge it in the garage. It might burn down. We're going to have to replace all these parts. Those, yes, as they age, they're in a different category. Because you might think, well, they're electric cars. They're not like regular. They don't have an engine and a radiator. Well, they don't have an engine, but they have a radiator because they got to cool the systems down. They overheat when they recharge, and if they discharge, they still got a fan and a radiator. And if those things break down and you're recharging them and the software doesn't work right and doesn't stop the charging, yeah, they can start on fire. But in terms of actual percentages, they do not start on fire more than normal cars. Normal cars actually burn up at a higher rate. Another myth is that you get more gas if you fill your car up in the morning because it's cooler, right? I hate to bust your bubble, but the gasoline is stored underground where it's already cool. The temperature of that gasoline does not change much. It's just like a cave, You go to one of these big caves, tourist caves, right? It's almost the same temperature in a cave year round, and that's air. Imagine if it was water, it'd be even more the same temperature. Don't get up real early and fill your car up and think you're going to get a better deal. You're going to get the same amount of gasoline coming out of that tank when it's cold early in the morning or whether it's hot in the afternoon because it's underground. The stuff's stored underground and it's just sitting there. You're going to pump the same amount regardless because it's coming from underground. Now, maybe back in the day when they had my grandfather's day, they had the big bubbles on the top with gas and it went by gravity and they're heated by the sun. Yeah, you might have gotten a little bit more, but not today. Ramos 1980 says, Scotty, what do you think of a 2014 Explorer EcoBoost 2-liter? Does the turbo need to be replaced? What exactly does EcoBoost mean? I am not a fan of the 2-liter EcoBoost. You got a 4-cylinder engine, you have a turbocharger ramming air into it, and you also have GDI fuel injectors that work over 1,000 pounds per square inch pressure. A lot more pressure inside the engine. They do wear out faster. Now, I can't tell you if the turbo needs to be replaced now or then. I'd have to look at the vehicle. But they do need replacing eventually. They wear out. Let's say you already own one. You didn't say whether you're buying one or you already own it. Let's say you already own it. Make sure you change the oil with full synthetic oil every 5,000 miles. Because the same oil that lubricates your engine lubricates the turbo. And if you get dirty oil in that turbo, it'll wear out faster. It's even more important to change your oil on a turbocharged GDI car than in any other car that's ever been manufactured. And make sure you get that new GF6 oil, the one that is made for those engines, and change it every 5,000 miles. Don't listen to the crap that other people do. You can change it every 12,000, 15,000. No, change it every 5. Oil's cheap. Engines and turbos cost a fortune. I personally wouldn't buy that. I would rather get one with a V6 engine that can hold the pressure more. But if you do own one, take care of the thing. Change the oil all the time. Pretty dude said, Scotty, I overfilled my gas tank. It was pumping slow and it didn't have any back pressure, so it flowed all over the place on the ground. I wiped it up, but so far it isn't setting off any idiot lights. How long should I worry about damage to the vapor canister? One time generally will not destroy a vapor canister. The vapor canister gets the gas vapors and then is supposed to get rid of all the hydrocarbons and then let pure air either go out to the atmosphere or go back into the intake and be reburned by the engine. One time ain't gonna hurt it. Watch it from now on. Maybe pump it a little faster or go to a different gas station that has better nozzles that are gonna self-shut off. This is the reason I tell people don't top up your tank. Once it goes click, put it away and drive. Cause if you do overfill it, there's the hose. It's the vent hose. Raw gas will get in the vent hose. Raw gas will get in the vapor canister, and over time it will destroy it. But one time, it shouldn't have done any damage at all. Just don't go back and do it over and over again. Because then those things cost a fortune, those vapor canisters. Gasoline does evaporate. You know, it's not going to sit there forever. But if you keep overfilling it, then you'll eventually clog it all up. But one time shouldn't have hurt it at all. Mo says, Scotty, who makes the best truck? Ford or Chevy? Well, out of those, Ford by far. Chevy makes crappy trucks now. The Silverado 1500s are junk. I've had so many customers buy them, go through 2-3 differential in them and 110,000 miles. They don't make them that well. Personally, I would get a Toyota truck because they seem to last the longest. But between Chevy and Ford, the Ford trucks are much better than the Chevy trucks these days. Back in my father's day, they were neck and neck racing, but Chevy quality is, over the past decade or so, they've really gone downhill. And out of those, I definitely would get a Ford. And if I did get a Ford, I'd get a V8. I wouldn't get one of these fancy, smaller engines with turbos. I would get a naturally aspirated, non-turbo V8 Ford. Dylan Giants fan says, my car stutters when it idles and when I'm driving regularly. I'm really ripped off by a mechanic. I got a 2006 Scion TC with 126,000 miles. I took it to a mechanic, and I told him it had a code for the MAF sensor because I left it unplugged when I diagnosed it, and that wasn't a problem. 2 days later, he says, oh, the MAF sensor's the problem. $400 later, I picked it up, and it's running exactly bad. I'm sure he doesn't know what's wrong, so I'm going to ask him for my money back, try to fix it myself. What do you think it could be? Definitely get your money back and say, give me my MAF sensor back. Here's the one you bought. Do whatever you want with it. The guy obviously didn't listen to a word you say. I've seen that myself. Dealing with people. I dealt with a doctor once, and I told him exactly what was wrong with me. He just didn't listen to a word I said, and he had a different diagnosis. I said, Doc, but look, I looked it up on the Columbia School of Medicine, and I figure, since it's over here, here's what the problem. He says, oh yeah, you're probably right. And that's what I told him in the first place. But he didn't listen to a word I said until I had to repeat it, right? Well, there's a lot of stupid people out there, and the guy just didn't listen to what you said. And then he sees, oh, the MAF code is on. Yeah, because you unplugged it, right? And then plugged it in later, and the code was still there. That's one thing. If you ever do something like that again, erase all the codes before you bring it to a mechanic so it doesn't confuse them, you know? That's a Scion. They generally are pretty good cars, but it's an '06. They have those bad engines that burn oil. The first thing you want to do is check the spark plugs. They could be all oil fouled. Now, replacing the spark plugs will make it run better in the short run. Eventually, you would have to rebuild the engine, but if that makes it run good enough, do that. Replace the spark plugs. See if that fixes it. Do the obvious things first. Check the air filter. See if any vacuum lines or anything have fallen off. Start there and pray it's not just the engine's all worn out, because they will in those things, because they had bad piston rings. Vegas ITC says, I'm stumped. My daughter's got a 2013 Hyundai Elantra, 137,000 miles. She came to a red light. It stalled. First time it ever happened. It started and she drove, and now there's no check engine light or anything, but it idles really rough. You mentioned you don't have a check engine light on yet, but that's yet. If there's no check engine light on, but it's idling rough, just wait a day or 2 or 3, because the computers have to equilibrate everything, and if it's really idling that rough, check engine light's going to come on, and 99% of the time. And then you'll get a good code. Sometimes patience is a virtue. You know, if it runs good enough, but it idles and stumbles around, it could easily be a sensor or a vacuum leak or something, but wait until the check engine light comes on. Then you know what area to exactly look at. That's the best way to do it, because if it doesn't have a code yet, unless you're a mechanic like me and you put in a scan tool and the scan tool says no codes, but when you go to live data, you see some of the live data is way off, then you know, well, that's the area where the problem is, and it hasn't tripped the code yet, but that is definitely the problem. If you don't have a code reader like that that can do live data and understand how to read the live data, you can pay a mechanic to do it, of course, but you're trying to fix it yourself. So I would just say wait. It's when the check engine light comes on, then you're going to get a code or codes that'll give you what area to check out first. And of course, look at simple things like maybe a vacuum line came off, maybe the air filter's clogged. Pull out one spark plug, see if it's all worn out, and if it is, replace all the spark plugs. You can do the simple things first. But eventually, if it's really idling and bad and stumbling, it'll trip a code and you'll get a better idea of what to look for. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.